The Russians are hammering towns and villages. Entire villages and towns have been reduced to rubble. And here I include the Ukrainian people. You were wrong in trusting the United States of America. You're not wrong in defending your country. Top attendance as lawyers, everybody is saying we'll fight the Russians. You have your citizens sacrificing their comfort, sacrificing their families, going to the front, fighting a war. And what are you doing? You're taking away the money. Jai Hind friends, I'm Major Gaurav Arya and you're watching the Chanakya Dialogues English. Like this video, subscribe to our channel and don't forget to press the bell icon. I have news from the Ukraine and Russia war, ladies and gentlemen, and it's honestly heartbreaking. I'm not talking about the death and destruction because that is heartbreaking wherever it happens. It doesn't matter whoever dies, it's heartbreaking. But here, it is the breaking of the heart of a Ukrainian soldier. And I can feel it because this man says that he has been betrayed by his own leadership. This is about Russian troops streaming into Ukraine. Now, what this guy was told and what his team was told was that at great expense, at great cost, the Ukrainian government was making defenses. It could be anything. It could be laying of mines. It could be physical defenses. You know, it could be concertina wires. It could be anything. And they were assured that don't worry, let the Russians come and your defenses will be rock solid. The Russians are not going to be able to come in. And then this guy, this Ukrainian soldier, this commander sees drone footage. And the Russian soldiers in that drone footage are strolling into Ukraine as if they're strolling, you know, in a garden in the evening, a garden in the neighborhood, a public park. And he says, what's happened? Where were the defenses? You know, we were supposed to stop the rampaging Russian army. Where are the defenses? And this is so sad, actually, what Zelenskyy and his cohort have done to the Ukrainian soldier. It's really shameful. And here, I'm just reading. And I want you to know, because I've had it written down here by the team. It's right on top here. And this says, there was no first line of defense. This is Denis Yaroslavskyi. Denis Yaroslavskyi is the commander of a Ukrainian Special Reconnaissance Unit. And he expresses anger, frustration, hurt, and heartbreak. And he says, there was no first line of defense. We saw it. The Russians just walked in. They just walked in without any minefields. And then he sees the video and he shows the video taken from a drone a few days ago. Columns of Russian troops simply walking across the border, unopposed. There was nobody to oppose them, right? He says officials have claimed that defenses were being built at a huge cost. This is that commander of the Special Reconnaissance Unit. He says that, officials had claimed that defenses were being built at a huge cost, but in his view, those defenses simply weren't there. There was nothing. So apparently, either this was an act of negligence, of corruption, it wasn't a failure, it was a betrayal. So this is how this soldier, Denis Yaroslavskyi, commander of a Ukrainian Special Reconnaissance Unit, feels. He feels betrayed. He says this is betrayal. You promised us something. And they got the funds, by the way. The Ukrainian government, the Ukrainian officials got funds. They got funds from the EU. They got funds from the United States of America, billions upon billions of dollars. And that was supposed to be used for building up absolutely iron wall defenses against the Russians. And here he says he saw the Russians walk into Ukraine. There wasn't a single mine there. So what do you think the Ukrainian government has been doing, ladies and gentlemen? And I'm quoting a bona fide source here, right? This is a proper quote. What do you think the Ukrainian government is doing? The Ukrainian government is probably taking billions of dollars of money from the Americans, from the Europeans, from other people who would want to see Russia down and out. And then these guys are siphoning off the money. They're just taking away all the money, leaving the Ukrainian soldiers to die. This is so sad. You see, the Russian advance swallowing up approximately 100 kilometers square, that is approximately 62 square kilometers, miles actually, I beg your pardon, of Ukrainian territory are reported to have reached the border town of Vovchansk. So they've reached the border town of Vovchansk. Earlier, the frontage of the war, ladies and gentlemen, was approximately 1,000 kilometers. Now it is expanding. And in addition, in the last few days, the Ukrainians have lost 100 square kilometers to the advancing Russian army. This is Denis Yaroslavskyi, Denis criticizes the lack of defenses, stating that Russian troops simply walked into Ukrainian territory without opposition, highlighting the absence of minefields and other defenses despite prior intelligence. Now listen to this. And I'm reading point by point. I'm referring to my notes so I don't get anything wrong and the correct news reaches you. Now look at this. Despite prior intelligence indicating the likelihood of a Russian incursion, Ukraine appeared ill-prepared for the recent advances. So these guys knew well in advance. So there are American satellites to help them, European satellites to help them. There are European Special Forces, that is the British SAS, the US Navy SEALs, the Green Berets, Delta Force. Everybody is there. They are not fighting wearing uniforms, but they are there in an advisory capacity. Anything that Russia does, Ukraine knows. Because the Americans have the finest satellites on earth. And they are monitoring every aspect of this Ukraine-Russia war. They are monitoring the advances of the Russian army. And these guys were told that the Russians are coming. Here's the money. Prepare for it. These guys swallowed up the money and they were ill-prepared. They let their own soldiers die. It's a damn shame. Now, this says that Denis is this Special Reconnaissance Unit commander. Denis, along with his men, is preparing to return to the front near Vovchansk. Fearing that the town could soon fall back into Russian hands, the population of Vovchansk has drastically decreased due to the conflict. Russian tactics in Kharkiv include reducing Ukrainian villages and towns to rubble, with reports of relentless shelling and use of glide bombs causing widespread destruction. Now, the Russians are hammering towns and villages. Entire villages and towns have been reduced to rubble. The Ukrainian army is fighting bravely, there is no doubt about that. And that is the problem. The problem is that the Ukrainians are fighting bravely. I mean, people have left their jobs as professors, as soccer coaches, as shop attendants, as lawyers, as engineers. Everybody's taken a gun. Everybody's saying we'll fight the Russians. You know, this is something that is worthy of praise. This is something that is worthy of acknowledgement. They are a courageous people. They refuse to be, browbeaten into submission. Yes. But what about the Ukrainian government? You have your citizens sacrificing their comfort, sacrificing their families, going to the front, fighting a war, and what are you doing? You're taking away the money. So this guy, Denis, I can imagine the plight of the soldier. You know, he heads an elite unit. This is a Special Reconnaissance Unit. He heads an elite unit, and this guy watches the drone feed. And he says, where are the defenses? There is not one single mine, not one single anti-tank mine or anti-personnel mine. It's a clean field. The Russians have walked into Ukraine like it's a stroll in the garden in the evening, a leisurely stroll. And do you think this has happened only here? Ladies and gentlemen, this has happened at a lot of places. This is not just the only place. It's happened at so many places in Ukraine where the Ukrainian government has let down the Ukrainian people. You can't fight the Russians like that. Well, there have been a lot of deserters in the Russian army. There is no doubt about it. A lot of Russians are against this war. There is no doubt about it. But at least the Russian government is single-minded in its pursuit of victory. It's single-minded. Maybe the Americans are single-minded in their pursuit of victory over Russia. Maybe the Europeans are single-minded. Maybe the British are single-minded in their pursuit of victory over the Russians. But are the Ukrainian government officials single-minded? No. And they have to be single-minded because they are the leaders of the Ukrainian people. They are the people leading their army or the defense ministry. And these guys, they don't care. They just take away the money, stash it into their foreign bank accounts, let the Ukrainian soldiers die. Look at this. It's a bloody shame. The delay in US approval for more military support has limited Ukraine's resources, resulting in a significant ammunition shortage of Ukrainian troops. And yes, the Ukrainian government and the people, and here I include the Ukrainian people, you were wrong in trusting the United States of America. You're not wrong in defending your country. And here I'm not going to take sides. I'm not saying that Russia is good or Ukraine is good. No. As an Indian, as a neutral observer, let me say, you have every right, I'm talking to the Ukrainian people, you have every right to defend your country. But I think Zelenskyy is a bloody thief. He's a thief. Initially, America said, go ahead, Ukraine, fight the Russians. We are with you. We'll give you support, diplomatic, financial, military. Don't worry. Go on the offensive. The Ukrainians felt very happy, and initially the Americans did support. Now, there is the small issue of around 65 billion US dollars, which has got stuck up. First, the speaker said it's okay. Now, I think it's been delayed by the Congress or somebody else. There are these committees and committees inside America, and they blockade. And how are the Ukrainian soldiers, without weapons, without ammunition, supposed to fight a rampaging Russian army? So how do you expect the Ukrainian military to fight the Russian military? The Russian military is far larger. They have unity of purpose in spite of their problems. And they have a massive, massive military-industrial complex, which the West cannot keep up with. The entire NATO cannot keep up with the Russians. That is the level of Russian manufacturing. I'll explain to you as we go later. I have some interesting data for you. Now look at this. The situation in Kharkiv highlights broader issues within Ukraine, including the slow mobilization of troops and the failure to build adequate defense lines. Ukrainian officials maintain that Kharkiv city is not under immediate threat of a ground invasion, but the continued Russian advance raises concerns about the city's vulnerability to Russian artillery. Of course, the city of Kharkiv is going to be vulnerable to Russian artillery. Russia has got long-range guns. They've got multi-barrel rocket launchers which can go up to 120 kilometers. They can flatten Kharkiv. Apart from their fighter jets and apart from so many other things here. So many other things, long-range artillery, rocketry. And Russians believe in massed artillery. They've been doing this since the Second World War. Massed armor, massed artillery, this is typical Russian thinking. 200 artillery guns, 500 artillery guns, flattening entire cities. That is how the Russians fight. So when it comes to Kharkiv, once Kharkiv is in range of the Russian artillery guns, their long-range rockets, their MBRLs, multi-barrel rocket launchers. What do you think is going to happen to Kharkiv? Now, Denis Yaroslavskyi, the same guy, commander of the Ukrainian Special Reconnaissance Unit, believes that while Russian forces may focus on capturing the entire Donbas region, they're also exploiting weaknesses along the 1,000-kilometer front, as seen in Kharkiv. Denis expresses frustration and anger over the loss of territory and lives due to inadequate defenses, stating that the sacrifices made in 2022 to reclaim territory are being undermined by lack of fortifications. And what are these lack of fortifications, ladies and gentlemen? What are these lack of fortifications? Now the Americans are having second thoughts, are they? They are not so quick to supply dollars now. I have some data which you will find very interesting, and I would like to share this with you. Now, this is a CNN report of 11th March 2024. So, this report is barely a month old. So, you can say that this is the latest report. Now, this says the Russian military-industrial complex is producing nearly 3 times more artillery munitions than the entire West. So, there is NATO on one side, all right? There is NATO on one side, and there is Russia on the other side. And Russia is producing more artillery shells. Why is artillery important? Because essentially this has turned out to be an artillery war. Of course, it's an armored war. Of course, it's an infantry war. Of course, there is defense. Of course, there is attack. Of course, there is all of those things. Of course, there is fighting in built-up areas. But essentially, this has become an artillery war. Standoff. Hammer entire cities and towns and villages. And that is what Russia is doing. It's waiting. It's hammering cities into submission. Russia is producing about 250,000 artillery munitions per month. Again, here are the figures. Russia is producing 250,000 artillery shells a month, which is about 3 million shells a year. This is Russia. 3 million shells a year, according to NATO intelligence estimates. Officials say that Russia is currently firing 10,000 shells a day. Let that figure sink in. Let that figure sink in. On a 1,000-kilometer frontage, right? Give or take. A 1,000-kilometer frontage, Russia is firing 10,000 shells every single day. And the Ukrainians are able to fire only 2,000. How do you win? How do you win? For all the tall claims of America and the NATO countries, and we'll support you and go and fight, and don't worry, we are behind you, we've got your back. Come to the White House for a state visit. Speak to the Congress. Here you are, Zelenskyy, on the cover of Time magazine. Here you are. Speak your heart out. We stand with you. Freedom. all that was nothing but a sham. The only way to end this war, and I'm saying this again, is for countries like India. India is a party that is trusted both by the Ukrainians and the Russians. The Europeans are not trusted because Europeans are having this fancy summit in Switzerland in a 5-star hotel. It's supposed to be a peace summit in which they have not invited the Russians. How can you have a peace summit for the Russia-Ukraine war without inviting one party? Go figure. I don't know what they're thinking about. But I think if India takes the lead, and after the elections, I think Prime Minister Modi should take the lead, invite Vladimir Putin and invite Zelenskyy, or meet them at a neutral ground somewhere and say that, hey, you guys need to fix this here. You guys need to get together and talk to each other and come to mutually agreeable terms, and also explain to the United States of America, because today, even if the Ukrainians want to stop, if the Ukrainians say, okay, 2 years, enough death and destruction, let it stop. Let the war stop. America won't let the Ukrainians stop. Because Zelenskyy is too far hand in glove with the Western powers, especially the CIA. And the CIA had a report, they discussed a report in Congress in which they clearly said that Zelenskyy is pilfering money. He's taking away CIA money. Hundreds of millions of dollars have gone missing. That is why that Special Reconnaissance Unit commander, that soldier of the Ukrainian army fighting for his motherland, fighting for his country, is heartbroken, because he knows that his own leaders have betrayed him. The Russians he can fight. He might lose, he might die, but the Russians he can fight. How can he fight the bureaucrats and the officials back in Kiev? That is a war that the Ukrainian soldier cannot win. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen, for watching this video. And if you like this video, press the like button. Subscribe to our channel. Don't forget to press the bell icon. Jai Hind, Vande Mataram, Bharat Mata Ki Jai.